John Donne.
Metaphysical poet of passion and faith. John Donne, 1572–1631, stands as one of the most influential poets in English literature, a master of metaphysical poetry whose works bridge the spiritual and the sensual, the intellectual and the emotional. His life was marked by dramatic shifts, from a rakish youth to a devout cleric, mirrored in the versatility of his poetry. Donne's innovative style, characterized by wit, complex imagery, and philosophical depth, left an indelible mark on English poetry, influencing generations of writers. In this video, we will explore his biography, his literary oeuvre, and his enduring legacy in the poetic tradition. John Donne was born in 1572 in London to a prominent Roman Catholic family during a time of intense religious persecution in Elizabethan England. His father, also named John, was a successful ironmonger, and his mother, Elizabeth Heywood, was the daughter of a playwright and niece to the Catholic martyr, Sir Thomas More. Donne's Catholic upbringing shaped his early worldview, though it later became a source of conflict as he navigated a Protestant-dominated society. At age 11, Donne matriculated at Hart Hall, Oxford, but left without a degree, likely due to the requirement to swear the oath of supremacy, which conflicted with his Catholic faith. He later studied at Cambridge and, in 1592, enrolled at Lincoln's Inn to pursue law. During this period, Donne was known for his wit and charm, immersing himself in London's social scene and earning a reputation as a libertine. Donne's life took a pivotal turn in the 1590s when he began to distance himself from Catholicism, eventually converting to Anglicanism. This shift was pragmatic, enabling him to pursue a career in public service. By 1598, he secured a position as secretary to Sir Thomas Egerton, the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal. However, his secret marriage in 1601 to Anne More, Egerton's 17-year-old niece, upended his prospects. The clandestine union enraged Anne's father, Sir George More, who had Donne imprisoned briefly and dismissed from his post. Donne famously wrote to Anne during this ordeal, "John Donne, Anne Donne, undone," encapsulating the personal and professional ruin that followed. The couple endured years of financial hardship, living with relatives and raising 12 children, 7 of whom survived infancy. Anne's death in 1617, shortly after giving birth to a stillborn child, plunged Donne into grief, profoundly influencing his later religious poetry. In 1615, under pressure from King James III, Donne took holy orders in the Church of England, a decision that marked his transformation from a secular poet to a divine preacher. He was appointed Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in 1621, where his sermons gained widespread acclaim for their eloquence and theological depth. Donne's later years were marked by illness, including a near-fatal bout in 1623, which inspired his devotions upon emergent occasions, notably the meditation, "No man is an island." Donne died on March 31st, 1631, leaving behind a legacy as both a poet and a preacher. His life, a tapestry of passion, struggle, and redemption, deeply informed his literary output. Donne's early poetry, collectively known as songs and sonnets, reflects his youthful exuberance and romantic entanglements. Written largely in the 1590s, these works showcase his mastery of the love lyric, blending sensuality with intellectual rigor. Poems like "The Flea" use a conceit, an extended metaphor, where a flea biting both lovers becomes a symbol of their union, playfully subverting traditional courtship tropes. "The Sun Rising" exemplifies Donne's audacity, addressing the sun as an intruder on lovers' privacy, while "A Valediction, Forbidding Mourning" offers a tender, philosophical farewell, likening the lovers' souls to a compass. These poems are notable for their conversational tone, irregular meter, and startling imagery, departing from the polished Petrarchan sonnets of his predecessors. Donne's wit extended to satire and elegy. His 5 satires, 1593 to 1597, critique societal vices, corruption, hypocrisy, and folly, with a Juvenalian edge. Satire 3, for instance, grapples with religious truth, reflecting Donne's own spiritual turmoil. His elegies, such as "To His Mistress Going to Bed," are boldly erotic, celebrating physical love with a frankness that shocked contemporaries. These works reveal Donne's versatility, balancing humor, critique, and passion. After his ordination, Donne's poetry turned toward the divine, producing the Holy Sonnets, c. 1609 to 1619, a series of 19 meditative poems exploring sin, salvation, and mortality. "Death, Be Not Proud," Holy Sonnet 10, boldly confronts mortality, asserting that death shalt die through the soul's eternal life. "Batter My Heart," Holy Sonnet 14, is a raw plea for divine intervention, using violent imagery to depict spiritual struggle. These sonnets fuse Donne's metaphysical style with intense piety, cementing his reputation as a religious poet. Beyond poetry, Donne's prose, particularly his sermons and devotions upon emergent occasions, demonstrates his rhetorical prowess. His sermon, "Death's Duel," 1631, delivered shortly before his death, is a haunting meditation on mortality, preached as his own funeral sermon. These works, while not poetry, share the same intellectual depth and vivid imagery, reinforcing his literary stature. Donne is credited with founding the metaphysical poetry movement. a term coined by Samuel Johnson in the 18th century. This style is defined by its use of conceits, philosophical inquiry, and a fusion of emotion and intellect. Unlike the smooth, idealized verse of the Renaissance, Donne's poetry is jagged, argumentative, and richly textured. Poets like George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, and Henry Vaughan followed in his footsteps, adopting his techniques to explore faith, nature, and human experience. Donne revolutionized poetic form by rejecting the strict conventions of the Elizabethan sonnet. His irregular rhythms and enjambed lines mirror natural speech, creating a dynamic, conversational effect. His diction blends the colloquial with the erudite, drawing from science, theology, and law. For example, in A Valediction, the compass conceit reflects his engagement with contemporary mathematics, showcasing his interdisciplinary approach. Donne's poetry expanded the emotional range of English verse. He tackled love not as an abstract ideal, but as a lived experience, carnal, intellectual, and spiritual. His religious poems plumb the depths of doubt and devotion, offering a raw, personal faith that resonated with readers. This thematic complexity inspired later poets, including T.S. Eliot, who praised Donne's ability to unify thought and feeling. Initially, Donne's poetry circulated in manuscript form among a small coterie, gaining wider recognition after his death with the 1633 publication of poems. The 18th century found his style too rough, but the 20th century saw a revival led by Eliot and the new critics who admired his modernity. Today, Donne is celebrated for his originality, his influence evident in modernist poetry, and beyond. John Donne's life was a journey from worldly ambition to spiritual calling, mirrored in a body of work that spans the profane and the sacred. His songs and sonnets, holy sonnets and prose, reflect a mind unafraid to wrestle with life's big questions: love, death, and God. By pioneering metaphysical poetry, Donne reshaped English verse, leaving a legacy of innovation and emotional truth that endures nearly 4 centuries later. His voice, at once intimate and universal, continues to captivate and challenge readers, securing his place as a titan of literary history.